So the vacation rental startup Vacasa is now valued at over $1 billion after its latest fundraising round that was led by private equity firm Silver Lake. It comes amid growing interest in short-term rentals. Airbnb expected to go public next year. Marriott recently unveiling its own home-sharing platform earlier this year.
I can't imagine any one person wanting to buy Vacasa in its current form because it's losing too much money.
And one of the biggest deficits on the operations side has been, their poor operating performance, all the bad reviews. A great product will overcome poor marketing. A great marketing will never overcome a poor product. And hearing that they spent $190 million on advertising, to me, with the reports of such a poor product and delivery of that poor product, that's like burning that money.
Hang on to your seats. An explosive new episode of Straight Fire VR is coming to you now. Coming to fruition, the big hopes of 2019 are looking like a season of failed crops. What can be done to save the harvest? Our returning guests have insight in the arena. Shortcut's co-founder and chief revenue officer, Michelle Marquis, is here to explain. Alongside her, completing the duo, is the other co-founder and chief revenue officer at Shortcuts, Jeff Robertson. Also fired up for the roast is our co-host, the regional director of business development at V-Trips, Miriam Ramsey. The chief griller today is the founder and CEO of V-Trips and the host of Straight Fire VR, Steve Milo. Steve, get the fire started.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. I'm here with two of our best returning guests and our co-host Miriam Ramsey for another episode of Straight Fire VR. And we're going to get right to it with some recent news. And I've got some experts here to try to help me understand what is going on. So, Jeff, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Sonder, the urban company play, entered into a strategic agreement with Marriott, which sent their stock from $20 million market cap to $70 million, down from a $2 billion market cap. But can you make sense? Why would Marriott get into a strategic deal with a company that hasn't even reported financial statements for months, has all kinds of shareholder lawsuits, and was literally going to run out of cash and probably go bankrupt? Why would Marriott get into a deal with Sonder?
It must have been a sweetheart deal for them. I was shocked when I saw the news and the headline, and was in thinking about it. The only thing I could think of, maybe a couple of things. I don't know. This is all speculation, but my brain went towards they perhaps Sonder, with their more urban style inventory, was going to fill a gap in Marriott's mix. I don't know Marriott's mix that well, the inventory enough, but it seems like most of the property management partners that I know are signed up with them are, more traditional homes in vacation destinations rather than urban locations. So maybe it was a play there. They had to have, gotten a really sweetheart deal. I'm sure Sonder is grasping for any distribution they can get to try and drive bookings in their units. And so, perhaps for them, it's a last ditch effort, and it was such a nice deal for them, for Marriott, that they couldn't say no. I don't know.
Well, Michelle, interestingly enough, the person from Marriott who commented on the record was the head of the global officer of merger and acquisitions, Tim Grissus, not Jenny Shea, who's the head of Marriott Homes and Villas. I thought that was interesting. In case people aren't aware, Sonder is claiming they have 9,000 units under management, and they're in 8 different countries. We don't really pay attention to them that much because they're really an urban play. They're not a leisure resort.
Yep.
But Michelle, why would Marriott get into the middle with a company who literally was on the doorstep of being delisted for the second time from the NASDAQ? Right now, they haven't even issued financial statements or final financial statements because of their accounting irregularities. I mean, it's incredible. What do you think? What you get lots of inside information.
Well, I actually think it is a sweetheart deal for both of them. And here's why. Like, any hotel or any business at all, they say, do we buy, build, or partner? Right? When they're looking at expansion, that's how, no matter what kind of company, those are the things you think about. And I think Marriott, to spin up a vacation rental type brand, think about the cost of that and actually doing that and getting investors and all of that sort of thing to build a brand out that truly is a, sought out as a short-term rental brand, right? So they get 9,000 units. At the same time, they get those 9,000 units into their distribution program, which is about using points and getting more of those points off the book in their distribution. I think it's Homes and Villas by Marriott. So they're going to get 9,000 units there. Sonder is going to get by Marriott on their brand, which means when somebody's going to a destination that wants a more of a home stay or a condo stay or that sort of thing, they now have a real choice. Residence Inns does not feel like a home stay. Residence Inn is very stale and hotel-like and doesn't feel the same sort of, it doesn't have the same sort of experience you have when you're even in any of the Sonders that I've ever stayed in. They feel more homey. So they get distribution of Marriott and by Marriott. So I think I don't know the price they got. I don't know any of that, but I do know this. Together, I think it's pretty brilliant, to be honest. Pretty brilliant.
I think they done it more where the Homes and Villas are a more luxury scale.
I think they started that way.
Well, and I think they're trying to go back to that, which is bringing on Saunders, which is what Saunders' background has initially been, is not taking on the hotel or the motel, which means I need more money, but giving that more luxurious brand, which Marriott is like, whoop, we've onboarded a bunch of crap. People are starting to realize that. So let's partner with them and let's bring that higher scale back in.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to let you speak next because Miriam kind of hit the nail on the head, which is Marriott Homes and Villas went from, they were supposed to have curated high luxury inventory to turnkey and Vacasa inventory. And a little birdie told me Marriott's about to get rid of the Vacasa and turnkey inventory. Would that shock you?
No. Is that company still around?
Stop. You too.
No, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, I forget who wrote about it. Maybe Brooke in his summary of the earnings release or conversation, their notes this last quarter. I think he called out their attorney legal fees expenses had gone up dramatically. That sure does smell of M&A or higher bills while they're working with bankers trying to figure out, do we sell, do we liquidate, what do we do, because we are in deep sneakers, as they say. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of that inventory, particularly now that they have Sonder, even though the inventory mix is a little bit different. But nevertheless, 9,000 units is 9,000 units. That's a lot of choice for Bonvoy members at Marriott. After we don't read much about revenge travel anymore post-COVID, but one of the things that I do continue to see mentioned quite a bit is the blurring of, the bleisure, the business and leisure travel. And, Marriott and Bonvoy, a vast majority of them are business travelers who are on the road quite a bit. So perhaps they see an opportunity to book folks in Sonder type inventory for those multi-purpose type stays.
Right. And I think what listeners should look for is, does this inventory display in your Marriott Bonvoy search? I mean, one of the bigger challenges I've said that group has is when you do a search for inventory anywhere, it could be Gatlinburg, it could be Bend, Oregon, Homes and Villas is like a banner. I mean, it's not like when you're searching on booking.com and you do a search and vacation rentals appear with hotels and bed and breakfast and everything else. Like the vacation rental stuff has been hidden. So is the Sonder 9,000 units going to be displayed in the first tier of inventory? If so, then maybe that starts to move the needle. I think everyone who's tried to work with Marriott, it's been a disappointing experience to say the least. And that's Home and Villas. Interestingly enough, I did not see Home and Villas in the press release. So maybe this is a different attempt to try to figure out a way to work with the vacation rental category.
Hang on, Steve. I want to add to that because I think that's exactly what this is. This is them buying a brand, like any other hotel brand that, and you think about it, Marriott has a variety of brands that fit for a variety of experiences, right? That people are then loyal to the Marriott brand, but Starwood's in that, Autograph Collection is in that, Residence Inn, as I already talked about, is all part of that. So I think this is more about having a brand or a franchise that is associated with them not actually owning the inventory or managing the inventory. This is a true franchise play. That's what I believe.
Okay, so the next story we're going to talk about is what Jeff talked a little bit about earlier, which is Vacasa. So we're not going to rehash their quarterly earnings report, which were dismal. The unit count declined by 10%. They have 20% churn. They missed their numbers, and that's without getting into potentially what's going to happen in July. But Michelle, the rumors I am hearing is that their inventory, that they're trying to find buyers to buy pieces of Vacasa. Is that what you're hearing? Because there's a lot of people on the sidelines who seemingly are looking at pitch books to buy pieces of Vacasa.
Well, you know what? That's not a rumor I've heard. Just to be really, I have not heard that. I haven't heard about pitch books. If you have, then you've got the edge on that. I have heard that in general in markets that picking up inventory is getting easier and easier if it's Vacasa inventory.
Well, Jeff, have you heard anything on this? Because it makes more sense that the pieces would be worth potentially more than the whole, which is, I think, so the theory is, right, the whole of Vacasa is just too much. But there's some lucrative pieces, and also you would get back to the more local components. So if you carved up, let's say, the Panhandle, you might get a nice little premium for that. If you carved out the Outer Banks or North Carolina, you'd get a nice little premium for that. I mean, you could go on with carving it up and selling it off. And what does this sound like? It sounds like Resort Quest.
That's interesting.
You know what though, Steve? In the earnings report, as well as the wireless coconut, it sounds like they're trying to find ways to survive this and save money. And, they said flat out on the last earning calls, one of the things that we're going to look at is the technology. And, this number may be wrong, but at one point, I think they were spending $60 million a year in technology. Well, how good is their technology? Could another company come in and, cut that down to any small percentage of that amount and have a good enough, and maybe they have pieces of their technology that's really good, they could add on to that, do interfaces, so they could cut that, because that would be a way to profitability as well.
Kind of like Lyric. Yeah, Lyric and Wheelhouse. Wheelhouse got spun out of a former operator, right?
That would make more sense for Vacasa. Separate the tech side, separate the property management, and start that way. Do a fresh bid that way. That's in my opinion, that's the only survival way they could.
Well, let me counter this, Michelle, because I do think what Miriam said and Jeff may be more accurate. So on their financials, they spending $63 million a year on technology, and that technology is inferior, right? So if you were to buy, let's say, the Panhandle or the Outer Banks, you would move them over to another property management system, right? And you would probably negotiate a really sweetheart deal. They've got this is above and beyond their operational costs for the sale, which would be cleaning and maintenance and transaction. So just to be clear, this number is separate from that, right? So this does not include housekeeping. They're spending $240 million on operations and support, which is, a crushing number. And then they're spending another $190 million on sales and marketing. And when you add all that up, you come up to about $600 million of G&A, which is in addition to $478 million of cost of sales. And that's why they're $60 million a year unprofitable, and nobody can absorb those costs, or nobody seems to be willing. But if you were to buy their contracts, you wouldn't have to take those costs, and maybe perhaps somebody down the line would buy their technology. Not sure what it's worth. But Jeff, what do you think about that?
Yeah,
I can't imagine any one person wanting to buy Vacasa in its current form because it's losing too much money.
I agree. And one of the biggest deficits on the operations side has been, their poor operating performance, all the bad reviews, all the assets, homeowners having troubles with somebody actually managing their assets. So it does feel like that's a really important consideration and would make perfect sense for a more regional focused or local market focused property manager who's got the infrastructure in place to absorb those. They've got the PMS, the infrastructure, tech, not only operating infrastructure, but tech infrastructure in place to be able to pull these on in a fairly, cost effective way. It reminds me of an old adage that a great product will overcome poor marketing, but great marketing will never overcome a poor product. And hearing that they spent $190 million on advertising, to me, with the reports of such a poor product and delivery of that poor product, that's like burning that money. I just don't understand it. That's a downward spiral that will continue, as we've seen, and I think will continue until they can get that product side and delivery side fixed.
So, Miriam, in your market, wouldn't the Vacasa inventory do better if it was rebranded, if the word Vacasa was removed?
Yes. That if they took that away and rebranded that entire division here, it would do tremendously better. And I think that's just not even in my market. I think that's in general. I think if they could rebrand on the Panhandle, right? Rebrand Outer Banks, rebrand Tennessee. I think that's 3 major markets for them to a scale, right? That could turn some stuff around if they went back local. But the thing is, they'll never do that. They love that brand.
No. But Michelle, because Michelle's the marketing person, Vacasa would never give up the name, but whoever would buy the Gatlinburg part of their inventory or the Texas part of their inventory, which the Texas part of their inventory, used to be pretty good. It was a lot of turnkey inventory. They would rebrand it to a local regional brand. That's my guess. What do you think about that? Because what we're all saying is the Vacasa brand actually has negative value at this point. The contracts probably, some of them are decent, and then you could potentially restart by just rebranding regionally this inventory.
Well, so what I'm trying to think about is sometimes we get so close to, like things that we don't always look from the outside in. Okay. So what we're saying basically is that Vacasa has a poor brand to the consumer. Right. That's what we're saying. I don't know if that's true or not. Just being honest, I don't know if that's true or not. I think homeowners are starting to feel burned. I think the industry as a whole has that Vacasa has a tint on its brand. So, I'll start by, I have heard people, and I just recently actually met with somebody who said, I was in a line at a concert. Somebody had vacation rentals and they were talking about they use Vacasa and how much they love it and why they love it and their homeowner thing. And it was just really interesting to me to sit there and listen to him and talk about how much he loved Vacasa. So, all I'm saying there is, of course, if you buy Vacasa inventory, you're going to change it to your brand. You're going to make it more local. Absolutely. But that's not to say that the consumer brand of Vacasa is bad. I don't know that.
I think it's market based. I think depending on where
I
you
get that.
is, I think that is the biggest thing.
As fun as this conversation is, we have to talk about something that's not so fun, and that was July results across the industry. So, Michelle, I'm sure you talked to a lot of people. We had Melanie Brown from Key Data on. July was not good for most property managers. What have you been hearing, and what are your reasons for why July felt so bad?
I think that the industry as a whole held rate too long. Because if you look at the data, ADRs are pretty good, even though occupancy was down. So I think that we in some markets held rate too long. Did you see how she pursed her lips? Did you see that? Like she had said, I told somebody we needed to do something about that. I do know people in markets who actually July ended up really great, but you know what they did? They changed rates back in March. They were doing things way sooner than I think the market thought that they had more opportunity than what was there. So, and the economy, whether it's fake news or not, the word is the economy is not great, which makes people nervous. So they wait to make decisions, or they don't make decisions at all, which changes travel behavior. So that's what I think about July. And, you guys probably, Steve, I'm going to assume in some markets you did okay because you were more reactive. Maybe not, but and in other markets where you didn't, you went, man, I wish we had grabbed that when the interest was there, because it's all about when the demand is versus when you get in front of them.
Yeah, July was tough because for whatever reason on the revenue management side, in the first quarter, they didn't react to the fact that the pacing was down. And so, granted, a lot of inventory for March and for June was booked within the last 60 days. And those months came through. But in July, unfortunately, we had natural disasters, tropical storms, wildfires. And when those things happen, people stop booking reservations. So the fact that we didn't have, those nights booked, the fact that we only booked a much smaller amount in the first quarter, and we had a lot of inventory left, even under the best of circumstances would have been difficult. And then we got hit by weather related disasters and stuff like that, and people just froze. So it was not a good situation. Miriam, what do you think about that?
That was in her hands.
I think that was a great explanation. No, look, we dropped it. I mean, you called it, Michelle. We didn't ride the wave correctly in a lot of markets, and we have to do better on the fall. The third and fourth quarter. I don't think we've made some adjustments for that. I don't think that we've been proactive enough yet. I think that is with some due diligence, some rewriting of some team members. I think we'll get there. But I definitely think as a whole, the entire market missed. I saw a funny on Facebook earlier. Justin Ford commented, he said, I don't know what people are talking about, the market's down. As everyone I've spoke to, everyone's either flatlined or up. What market is he in? Because we're not talking about that with us. None of you guys on this call are saying we're flatlined or up. So I'm not really sure where he's at.
Yeah, just in full transparency, I mean, Melanie Brown gets a lot of data, and the numbers were all down. So maybe there's some outliers. I do give kudos to people like Dennis Goheed, who were confident enough to go on LinkedIn and talk about how the numbers were really off in Orlando. And that's not an easy market to begin with. But Jeff, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so from the Costa Rican market here, it's primarily made up of gringos, Americans and Canadians coming down. We're at the high end of the market here, which is a little more insulated from some of the economic travel headwinds. I do know the low end of the market where much of our supply increase here has come in. It's doubled in the last 4 years, 3 bedrooms and smaller. And it's a race to the bottom from a pricing rate standpoint right now, and they're feeling it for sure. Our July was pretty decent. July and sort of late June, July and early August is sort of our second season. Our prime high season is December, late December through March is a real key time here. So we're kind of in booking season. One of the biggest we had a decent month. We got bailed out our last week of July. We had over a $400,000 week in bookings. So we're very excited about that. One of the interesting things we see here, and I'd be curious if you guys are experiencing any of that in the States or hearing it about it, booking window is all over the place. I mean, we're usually it's been a pretty tight booking window here, but we're taking far future bookings for May and July of next year already, which is almost unheard of here. Was the exception, and now boy, it seems every week we're getting May, June, July next year bookings.
So we're looking at pacing pretty carefully now for the fall, and it is astonishing when you start to look at the flash report, the number of people that are booking for 2025 versus 2024, which will take because it builds the pipeline. And we are currently up pretty well in August year over year on the flash report. And that'll continue if we don't have weather-related issues. Once we get hit by weather-related issues, we're going to see a freeze on advanced bookings. That's just what happens, unfortunately. But I think the issues are between those who are tapped out from a credit standpoint and those who aren't. And those who aren't may be looking at deals and grabbing them, particularly if the cancellation is flexible or moderate. And a lot of companies have changed their cancellation rates over the past year to year and a half under pressure to get bookings to moderate or flexible, which means great, you get a booking, but it's not a sure thing until you get within 60 or 30 days. Miriam, you've seen firsthand some of what happens if you are very flexible with cancellations and the weather turns bad or whatever. It can create havoc with cancellations going out the door. That's what happened in our Texas market, our New Mexico market. People just bailed because they didn't want to get into an area that was flooded or had some wildfires.
I think it's both, right? You're damned if you do correct pricing and it's so far out, and then they do have the cancellation policy. And then if you don't fix the rates, you don't have the bookings, you're both at an adjustment, right? I think cancellation policy is huge. I think that whether we're in strong markets where we have a lot of catastrophes that happen very easily, right? And I think not having rates correctly pushed out, but then the cancellation policy is huge across the board on everyone.
So Jeff, one of the things we're trying, but it takes our friends on the PMS side to help, is to go to a policy like the hotels where you can get a really good rate if you're willing to lock in on a non-refundable. So effectively, potentially as high as 20 or 30%, but you've got to lock in on a non-refundable rate. And then if you want moderate or flexible cancellation, you take a higher rate. It's weird that it hasn't really been built into the software systems, but we're pushing as hard as we can to get this on the roadmap because it's critical for us.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be, I guess now that you raised that, I never really thought of that, but you're right, particularly for high considered purchase like vacation rentals. how many 50% here down and 50% at 60 days out. And, that's been a pretty common thing, but locking it in, hotels have proven it works. And it's a way of capturing that revenue. In our market here in Tamarindo in Costa Rica is a little unique in that we've got fairly strict cancellation policies. And so we're not having as much, like 48 hours. You've got 48 hours to decide, and that's it. There is no refund or cancellation for holiday bookings, for example. Once you book, you're in 100%. So it's a little different here. We've got quite a bit of, so far anyway, knock on wood. It hasn't seemed to affect us too much yet, but I know that's not the case in the U.S. certainly, and would expect that it would drive bookings up front for sure.
Yeah. So Michelle, I want to talk about OTAs and share mix, but one of the bigger things that all the OTAs have been pushing V-Trips is to moderate our cancellation policies. Basically, every meeting we have with them is you need to make your cancellation policies more flexible. You need to make them more flexible. And we've said, well, can we tier them? Can we make certain holiday periods not flexible? And right now there's just not the ability to do that, which is what you would want to do. But what are you hearing? Or I think you're still with on the board of My Booking Pal, right? I mean, this has to be something which you discuss with clients all the time, which is that cancellation policies really drive conversion.
Yeah, well, and it also affects the algorithm too. They're not going to show something that has a 100% pay in full at the time of booking over something that says, cancel 24 hours out. So it's the exposure as well. So I'm on the same page as you, and it's technologically, how are we going to do it? Because like you just said, trying to get the property management companies to do it. Remember, it also has to render differently in your booking engine too. So there's a lot to get done to actually, make that work. And then, gosh, I start going into how do you actually deploy that? So then do you have the exact same thing on booking.com? You know what I mean? And is it more on booking.com than it is directly on your website? So it gets a little bit messy there. But clearly they want that.
Jeff, are you experimenting with any of these in terms of your OTA share? Are you playing around with cancellation policies? Because I mean, I gotta believe that if you're having a conversation with Airbnb, the first thing they're saying is your cancellation policy is too strict. Please make it flexible or moderate.
Yeah, Airbnb continues to be a healthy mix of our business, particularly with all the Vrbo challenges over the last 6 or 8 months. They're usually 35-ish% of our mix. It's usually been a third, and they've been slightly high. And boy, Vrbo sure has dropped down quite a bit. We are testing right now and use a 14-day cancellation policy, particularly for our wet season, our green season, as they call it here, to try and make it a little bit nicer. So you don't pay attention to the 9 feet of rain that come every month in September and October. But it is a beautiful time to be here, I'm told. And it is helping. But as a result, and you mentioned this when you first raised the topic, our number of cancellations, we used to get maybe 1 a month last year. And this year we're up to 1 to 2 per week as a result of it. So we are seeing quite a bit of increase in cancellations, and it's a little too early for me to draw a conclusion that says this was worth it, or, are we only, setting ourselves up for disappointment when it comes time closer to check in when things are getting canceled.
So Miriam, I'm going to tell you a story that'll shock you. Nothing really shocks Miriam, but this one will. So there's a person in the Panhandle, a company that somewhere in May put out an email of a 24-hour flash sale of like 20% plus off for anything in the summer. And their comment was it was the biggest revenue day in their history. It was also the biggest cancellation day in their history. So what people did is they canceled their booking and rebooked it. And that's the trap, right? That's the trap. If you don't really understand where your cancellation policy is, and people can cancel and they get a better deal, they're going to cancel and then rebook at a lower price. What do you think about that, Miriam?
I mean, that is, well, that wasn't us, was it?
Well,
I'm a little shocked that, I mean, not really. The things people are doing right now, that's amazes me. Yeah.
there's a lot of desperation out in the market. A lot of people that are worried. Some may be worried about meeting their payroll. I'm not sure there's a lot of really good news for the fall. Maybe in 2025, once we get past what will certainly be a contentious election cycle where people are less likely to spend money until it's over, maybe things will start to pick up. At least that's the hope. But we could spend all day on share shift, but instead we're going to talk about employee reviews. So I think this is something that's really interesting where employees, whenever we do an employee review at V-Trips, it's kind of a self-assessment. You send the self-assessment out and then they review themselves and then they send the self-assessment back. But in this case, Michelle sent a self-assessment to us, and I thought it would be great if we could all give her some valid feedback. It was a kind of a question about her. So
Oh my
let's
God.
go ahead. Let's go ahead and give her a self-assessment, because I think this is fun. I'm going to start with you, Jeff, because you know her the most.
Oh boy.
It said, what are the 3 or 5 unique qualities that Michelle possesses?
Gosh. Well, I'd love to. I'm not thinking of anything so snappy to come back with, but
Thank you, Jeff.
yeah, you're welcome.
I don't know what the purpose of this is.
Yeah. Let's see. Tenacious Michelle for sure. She's one of the most creative people I know. She's got a figure it out factor that is like nobody's business. She can figure out a way to get over, around, or through any obstacle. And obstacles usually don't slow her down, as we all know. And that's part of, I think, a big part of her continued success is she does not get deterred very easily. She can charge ahead. So I don't know. Those are the things that come to mind first, for sure.
Well, I certainly could add that she can argue both sides of a point. So that's incredible. She's really good at that. So Miriam.
I think what made for her, and I think, the what value, I think where you're going next with it is what value, she's not a yes person. I do love the fact that regardless to what topic we bring up to her on the show, on the podcast or whatever, she never just sides with us or with someone else. It's always her opinion. And I think that's huge in our industry of not being always that yes person or that pleaser, of being very charismatic and, giving that attribute every time.
Jeff, here's another one for you. What attribute for Michelle is unique to her and separates her from others?
I think I'm going to follow and agree with Miriam. I think it's her directness and her honesty. She is not afraid of telling the truth. In a room full of people who sidestep the truth, most days of their career. So she's got a certain penchant, and she is unafraid. I really appreciate the courage that she has for speaking truth to power. I wish I had more of that, honestly.
Well, that's why we love having her on Straight Fire VR.
Yeah, totally.
I wish I did it as graceful as she does it. I mean, I just Michelle kind of takes it back and really, takes it in and then comes out, and I'm just like.
Well, you know what Kyle Buhner said to me one time? Michelle, I don't know how you do it. You tell people their baby's ugly and they say, thank you.
It's the truth though. I do it. You and I would both say the same thing, and I'm the worst person. I'm going to HR immediately. If it's name our second kid after you.
Well, Miriam, you don't have as much sugar when you say it as Michelle. Michelle is much nicer.
It's only because I've had more practice. That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad we were able to end on a high note here where there's a lot of love for Michelle. We love
Thank
her
you.
as a guest here. We're hoping that as we head into the rest of 2024, things get a little bit better. At least our pacing and advanced bookings look a little better. But of course, we haven't gotten through the hurricane season. So that's the big thing for us. Even Jeff down in Costa Rica, I mean, everywhere. We just have to pray right now. I looked at the national hurricane site, and it said no storms for the next 7 days. So I thought, wow, that's great news. But things can change quickly. So on that note, thank you both. Thank you all three for a great episode of Straight Fire VR. And thank you, Heather, for your great production. Thank you again. Bye.
To watch previous episodes of Straight Fire VR, go to www.straightfirevr.com. For questions and comments, you can reach us at straightfirevr@gmail.com.